Today, we're going to unravel this incredible puzzle that's been hiding inside the Talmud for, well, over 1,500 years. It's a real legal mystery, and it all kicks off with this one single sentence about meat that looks super simple, but, as you'll see, it's anything but.
And here it is, this one little line from the Mishnah, which is one of the oldest Jewish legal books around. One may always slaughter. Seems obvious, right? I mean, if you want to eat meat, you slaughter an animal. But the ancient rabbis who read this, they knew something was up.
And that right there, that's the whole mystery. You see, you only make a law to permit something that people thought was forbidden, or to clear up some kind of confusion. So this statement, one may always slaughter, it kind of implies that there must have been a time, or maybe a place, where you couldn't just slaughter an animal for food whenever you felt like it. The big question is, why?
Okay, so our first detective on the scene is a scholar named Rabbah. He comes up with a theory based on the ideas of Rabbi Yishmael, and his whole take is that this debate isn't really about the act of slaughtering, it's about the reason you're doing it in the first place.
So this whole theory revolves around this one key phrase, meat of desire. This isn't just any old piece of meat. It's specifically meat that you eat for your own enjoyment, totally separate from any religious ritual at the Holy Temple. You can think of it like the difference between a holy offering and, just grilling up some burgers in the backyard because you're hungry.
So according to this theory, the story goes like this. Back when the Israelites were in the desert, they were all camped around the Holy Tabernacle. And at that time, all meat had to be a sacrifice. You couldn't eat meat just for pleasure. This meat of desire was totally forbidden. But then, once they entered the land of Israel and spread out, living miles and miles from the temple, that rule got relaxed. It was okay. But then, the temple was destroyed, the people are in exile, and suddenly nobody's sure what the rule is anymore.
And this is where it all clicks into place. This theory solves the puzzle perfectly. The Mishnah statement, one may always slaughter, is basically a legal ruling for this new reality of exile. It's telling everyone, hey, don't worry, the rules don't snap back to that super strict wilderness prohibition. You still have permission to eat meat of desire. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast.
Because now another brilliant scholar, Rav Yosef, steps into the ring. He hears this whole explanation and basically says, hold on a second. He thinks Rabbah has missed the entire point, and he offers a completely different solution, this one based on the opinion of another giant, Rabbi Akiva.
And Rav Yosef's argument is just razor sharp. He points out that if the whole issue is about getting permission to eat meat for pleasure, why does the law only talk about slaughtering? He says it should have read, one may always slaughter and eat. The wording just feels wrong. And that suggests the debate isn't about why you're eating, but how the animal is killed. So Rabbi Akiva's theory throws two new, super important terms on the table. On one side, you have shechita. That's the specific, humane method of ritual slaughter that we know today in Jewish practice. And on the other side, you have neḥira, which is, well, it's basically stabbing. Any other less formal way of killing an animal to eat it.
And this idea creates a totally different version of history. Rabbi Akiva's argument is that way back in the wilderness, just stabbing an animal for food was totally fine. But once they got into the land of Israel, the rules got stricter. Stabbing was outlawed, and only proper ritual slaughter, shechita, was allowed. So for him, when the Mishnah says, one may always slaughter, it's a clarification for the age of exile that says, the stricter rule still applies. You can't go back to the old way of stabbing. You must always use ritual slaughter.
Okay, let's just hit pause for a second here. Because what we've got are two massive, competing versions of history. They both explain that mysterious sentence we started with, but they paint two completely different pictures of what ancient life was actually like.
I mean, just look at this side by side. In Rabbi Yishmael's world, the big historical shift was from forbidding meat for pleasure to permitting it. But in Rabbi Akiva's world, the shift was from permitting stabbing to forbidding it. They have fundamentally opposite ideas about what was okay in the ancient wilderness. So, how in the world do you figure out which history is the right one?
Well, you do what any good detective would do. You go looking for evidence. And for these Talmudic scholars, the ultimate source of evidence is the Bible itself. So they basically put both of these theories on trial, and they cross-examine them using verses right from the text.
So Exhibit A is a direct challenge to Rabbi Akiva. In the book of Leviticus, when it's describing sacrifices in the wilderness, it specifically uses the word slaughter. Now, if stabbing was just the normal way people got their meat, why would the Torah go out of its way to specify this particular method for a holy sacrifice? It really makes it seem like stabbing wasn't the standard.
But Rabbi Akiva has a defense ready to go. He basically argues, look, you're comparing apples and oranges here.
Sacrifices are their own special category. The rules for what went on in the Holy Tabernacle were always way stricter than the rules for everyday life. So sure, you had to ritually slaughter a sacrifice, but you could still just stab a different animal for your dinner that night.
But the prosecution is not done with him yet. They bring up another verse, this time from the book of Numbers. Again, it uses the word slaughtered. It's in a wilderness setting, and this time it's talking about regular food, not sacrifices. This one looks like a really serious blow to Rabbi Akiva's whole theory.
And this is where we see a really brilliant counter move. Rabbi Akiva suggests that maybe, way back then, the word slaughter was just used more broadly. He argues that for the people in the desert, their act of stabbing an animal for food was, for all intents and purposes, their version of slaughter. It's a very, very clever piece of interpretation to keep his theory alive.
Okay, so now the tables completely turn. A verse from Deuteronomy seems to poke a huge hole in Rabbi Yishmael's theory. It says that even back in the wilderness, people could eat things like gazelles and deer. But here's the thing. Those are wild animals. They can never be brought as a sacrifice. So how could it be that all non-sacrificial meat was forbidden? And Rabbi Yishmael has an answer for this too. He just refines his position a little. He argues that the prohibition against meat of desire only ever applied to domesticated animals, like cattle, sheep, goats, the kinds of animals that could be brought as a sacrifice. Wild animals like deer, they were in a totally different category. They were always fair game.
So after all that back and forth, you're probably wondering, okay, so who won? Who was right? But you know what? That's actually the wrong question to ask. Let's just zoom out for a second and see what this incredible debate is really all about.
You see, the real genius of the Talmud isn't always about landing on one final correct answer. So often, it's about preserving the argument itself. It's about letting us witness this incredible intellectual process, watching these scholars try to piece together their own history, using the clues hidden in their most sacred books. What we've just walked through is like a perfect little snapshot of how an entire legal and ethical system gets built. It shows us that law isn't some static thing. It changes with time and place. It shows us that legal thinking is really a kind of detective work. And maybe most importantly, it proves that the very foundation of the law isn't just a list of rules from the top down, but a living tradition built from centuries of rigorous, passionate, and frankly, brilliant debate.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big idea to chew on. This ancient puzzle about meat forces us to ask a much bigger question about our own world. When we look back at history, how often are we really looking at a clear, objective record? And how often are we actually just seeing the winning side of a brilliant and maybe long-forgotten argument?